Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Monday, August 15th, 2022 Town Council meeting. If you will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. It feels like it's been a long time since we've been here. Are we on and off? I don't, hello?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I'm on. All right, so we'll start with public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment but cannot attend the meeting should email their written comment to publicmeetings@rockyhillct.gov. Okay, so just come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Yes, cutting it out.
Rich Paul, it's Policio, 8 Washington Street, Rocky Hill. Madam Mayor and members of the council, the Wethersfield Rocky Hill Elks Lodge, in partnership with the Rocky Hill Human Services, is sponsoring a drug awareness program on Tuesday, October 18th, room 1 from 7 to 9 p.m. After a discussion with Mayor Murata, and a discussion with my officers in the lodge, I thought it would be a good idea to invite the entire council to participate if you wish. I don't mean on the panel, but you're more than happy, unless you got expertise in drug abuse. But you're more than welcome, and I hope you're all there that night. It's October 18th. It's a Tuesday from 7 to 9 in the Rocky Hill Community Center. The drug awareness program is one of the most vital programs that the Elks Lodge gets involved in throughout the United States. Let us all participate and be partners with each other and every family and an individual to help stem the epidemic of drug abuse in this country and save lives. There'll be a panel of experts there, and they're open for questions, but usually we try to limit to like from 7 to 9. But there's a good panel, and 1 or 2 of the panel participants will be from the Connecticut Central Health District. So I would really appreciate it, and thank you, Mayor Murata, for having me extend an invitation to all of you. Thank you very much. I don't know, I've got a pretty good voice. I don't know.
I think it's coming in and out. Yeah.
Thank you.
But we'll get it in the minutes, so no worries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed Ciccarello, 40 Riverview Road. I wanted just to report on a few activities, encourage you to do a few things, and then ask a few questions. There's 3 things. So the first thing is I don't know if you heard, but we cleaned up Quarry Park recently. I want to give thanks to the Parks and Rec, of course, the Rocky Hill High School football team. I think it's Coach Dance and Alan Baglia, who facilitated it from Walk Bike Rocky Hill. There was a lot of metal, way too much metal in a compressor house, and it was a great volunteer effort along with staff. Parks and Rec brought down a dumpster. They brought down wheelbarrows. It was a great day. Ferry Park and Cerullo Park were also cleaned up, which is a fantastic thing to happen. I wanted to update you on the Friends of Center Cemetery. The Finance Committee allowed us to move towards making a website, and we're getting close to putting that up soon. We're working on the back end right now. The Historical Society has been cleaning a lot of gravestones, and then just recently the town invested through our sexton, Ray Sweezy, we invested some money to straightening out and fixing some gravestones. 13 gravestones were repaired. These stones were either fallen down, broken, and so when you walk through there, you can really tell the difference right now. Ames and Strasser are coming down. The railroad station's going up. There should be a song in there. Next time I'll bring them that banjo. Encouraging words. Tonight you have an update on the sustainable, or on the SMM grant. I would hope that in your discussion you're going to accept that grant, implement it for the good of our town and the earth. The other thing on your agenda tonight is formalizing the Sustainable Rocky Hill team into a task force. Perhaps, we would get minutes, get on the town website. My encouraging word to you would be that what we need is, we have volunteers, what we need also is staff, and we need political leadership in regards to people at the meetings. I want to thank the mayor, who's been coming to a number of our meetings, and thank you for that. The Pollinator Resolution also is in front of you. Stephanie Hennigan is here tonight, and she's really responsible for the beginning of a pollinator pathway in Rocky Hill. She started it at the Intergenerational Food Pantry Garden. We have now pollinator plants at the Historical Society. We have them at Town Hall, and we have them at Dinosaur State Park. So that right now are town facilities and state facilities that are that have pollinators. My concern is the pesticides and herbicides that are used in town. I've reported people that have sprayed pesticide or herbicide on Meadow Road, along Meadow Road, down along the Foundry. There was also been herbicide sprayed. It's not a good thing in my mind. The questions, I have two questions, and then I'll end my comments. The road here have been, the striping has been taking off, and so I would request if you could consider bike lanes along Old Main Street. We have zero bike lanes in town. This could be possibly our first, even if it's a small section. So I'd like to put that out, and if somebody can get back to me on whether or not it's feasible. And then lastly, if we can get a Foundry update, just wondering what's happening down at the Foundry. Let's go Rocky Hill. Thank you.
Stephanie Hennigan, 9 Maxwell Drive. I realize that it won't be a vote tonight, but I just want to mention the grant and say what I want to say, just so that during deliberations and thoughts on the contractual or whatever, that if we are accepted for the grant, that we accept it. Most days, a news report or someone's comment makes me say, I am really glad I'm old. There are just too many problems. I don't know how many people have to be killed before assault weapons are banned. The growing hatred and the rise of white nationalism leaves me in fear for my biracial grandchildren. I see little help or hope for government solutions. The politicians in Washington are paralyzed by party tribalism and beholden to money from lobbyists to stay in power. But when it comes to the dangers of climate change and the destruction and wear down of our planet, I am an optimist. I do think that we can make, each person and towns and states can make a measurable difference. Last fall, I collected pumpkins around my neighborhood. People put them out on the front stoops, and I went around and said, please put them in my wagon. They are not trash. They are not waste. They do not belong in your green tub. They are a valuable commodity that needs to be composted. And so they willingly let me lug their pumpkins out, and I threw them down in a sand pit. This summer, there's a compost bin at the pantry, and it's limited use because it's open to the rodents and vermits, but quite a few people have used it. I mentioned it to a couple of my friends, and one woman came over to my house and thanked me profusely for giving her the opportunity to do something good for the planet. She said, on Sunday, my son comes over for dinner, and we like fresh corn, so I will buy 6 ears of corn, and next week I will bring them down to the compost bin. I mean, there are probably a lot of people who want to think they can do something. I just really can't think of a reason we wouldn't want to get the organic, compostable, valuable product out of the trash and cease contributing to the methane that results from putting it in a landfill. So I hope as you consider all the problems that there are in accepting it, that you do take us on this journey with the grant. Thank you.
Can you re-get it? I lost it.
Derek Kalin, 116 Ridgewood Drive. How are you? I just wanted to add my voice to the people who have spoken already in favor of Rocky Hill accepting the SMM grant. To me, it seems like a perfect melding of fiscal responsibility and environmental responsibility. Adopting the grant and adopting the measures that the grant enables would not only save the town large sums of money, but it would do a lot, a heck of a lot, to reduce methane emissions. And it'd just be a wonderful thing. So I hope you consider it as you are making your decision. Thank you.
Good evening, all. Sandy Kelly, 25 Tollgate Road, Rocky Hill. I wasn't going to speak because I don't think there's going to be an actual action tonight on accepting the money. I know we've been approved, but I think it's kind of subliminal. If those of us who are talking, you put it in the back of your minds that there's a lot of support, even though you can't decide right now. I know there are some speed bumps to deal with, but keep it in your minds that there's a lot of real care about this, about moving forward, not being timid, not being concerned that it might not work out. We have to be positive. We have to be proactive. We have to look 10 years down the line. I hope we can work out the contractual issues, but when we get to this point, please keep in mind there are a lot of people that care. There are not many here, but they're out there. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Bob Herron, 37H Brookwood Drive, and I'm the town historian. I guess most of you know that. I had two things I wanted to talk about tonight. One is Straska Farm, and the other is sort of raising awareness that the Congregational Church is going to be 300 years old in 2027. If it's 300 years old, Rocky Hill's 300 years old, because the Congregational Church used to be the official church of Connecticut Colony. They made the laws for the town. So the town was the parish, and we're going to be 300 graybeards. Straska Farm, I talked to Ed Ciccarello, and he said they're thinking of naming that Straska Farm. You can see by this wad of paper, I've got an over 400-page title search on that property that I did when I knew we were going to acquire it. And there's incredibly deep history there. I mean, there's more there than a guy who grew tomatoes for 40 years. I go back as far as 1803. There was a man named Hart Lewis, and his brother was the pastor at the Congregational Church, small world. He started buying up plots of property, and that ultimately turned into Straska Farm, okay? He put it together, sold it to two brothers named Belden. That might be another familiar name to you. That's a very big town name. Okay, the Beldens owned it for several years. They sold it to a man named Boyd, who was an Irishman. If you know anything about that neck of the woods, you know the Hayes Farm is there, the Dillon Farm is there. They're all Irishmen, and they all showed up in the 1860s as a result of the Irish potato famine, which you've probably heard of. So there's a chunk of history in that. Okay. Piersick, who was Strasik's father-in-law, and Strazik have been there. Piersick got there in 1919, so we're talking about a 300-year-old town. 1919 is nothing. It's yesterday. Okay. And Straska took it over in 1973. So if you think about the depth of history, I think the history is much deeper than Piersick and Straska. An interesting side story, I don't know if you guys are reading the articles in Rocky Hill Life, but there was a man, and don't tell me I didn't bring that with me, there was a man named Caesar Freeman. Actually, his name was Caesar because he was a slave. He was a slave of Elijah Williams, who lived at 1 Pratt Street. And Elijah got his draft notice, and he said, I don't want to go, my slave will go instead. So he sent Caesar off to war, and in so doing, he emancipated him. He became free. And he changed his name from Caesar, whatever, probably Williams, to Caesar Freeman to indicate that he was free. Okay. And that in and of itself is an interesting story to me. Again, Straska Farm, deep history, get it? Okay, so Caesar served out his term, got his discharge, apparently bought a farm up there where Straska Farm is now, and farmed it for several years, sold it, moved to Oneida, New York. He applied for a Revolutionary War pension, which I've got a copy of if you're a real history fan. And just an incredibly interesting story. So when I say deep history, that land has some deep history. Sawmill Brook, is that the name of it, Ed? There used to be a fairly, well, I don't know how big it was, but there was an industrial complex there. So there's a lot of history. And as a historian, I care about these things. So I hope you'll give that some thought when you're naming this place. So if anybody wants this paper, I can turn it over to you.
You can pass it to Joanne,
Yeah.
and we'll keep it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
That's it.
Hello. My name's Mary Beth Maluccio, and I live at 4 Kroll Farm Road. And I'm here along with these other people here today to talk about the 2 items about the Sustainable Rocky Hill and the grant. And I want to say I've lived in Rocky Hill for 9 years now, and as I started getting involved in this, I learned a lot about the town. For example, I went as far back as in 2015 and read part of the Plan of Conservation and Development, or I know people call it the POCD, and that even predated by a year the creation of Sustainable CT by the Eastern Connecticut State University and many other organizations. So I was pretty proud of that it's been a town that's been concerned with conservation and development all along. And then I went through, the years following and the involvement of the Planning and Zoning Committee, and then the actions of the Sustainable CT being 13 different, very complex issues. The one that interests me the most is number 9. It's the one about the trash. So let's talk trash. I am a fan of curbside food scrap collection. I have friends in other towns like West Hartford, for example, who have this option, and I've been wanting to find out how to get the town more involved. And when I started getting more involved with some of the people here, I learned that there's this real effort that's been made for many years that I want to be a part of. And when I found out that this grant was being applied, and I learned more about the hiring of Pam Roach and all the research that you all have done and all the different town committees involved and the staff involved, I really wanted to say that I think this needs to happen in Rocky Hill. I also did some research with the DEEP to know that this isn't necessarily welcome news from like trash hauling companies. They're maybe one of the few that are, that stand to lose money if we divert food scraps to make compost. And I hope that the contractor that we signed up with in May will honor our commitment to Sustainable Rocky Hill and our desire to have that curbside food scrap collection. You know, a lot of towns don't offer trash collection at all anymore, you know, and we do, and I'm happy about that. I also have used the compost that the Rocky Hill leaves that you collect turns into compost, and I've used it for my garden. And, you know, we're a farming community. We should be doing this for our farms, too. So I'm hoping that, you know, this grant that's going to make it possible to do this pilot for free to any town residents who want it. I want it, and everyone here does too. And I just hope that you know that. And I just want to reiterate what others have said. All we need is for you to accept it, and together with your help and support, and the appointment of a new task force, which I would love to be on as well, we can improve our health, our planet, and the overall quality of life here in Rocky Hill, and save money at the same time. I believe it's a win-win. So, thank you.
Okay, we have one write-in public comment that Deputy Mayor Sharmat will read into the record.
Alrighty.
I was reading it from my cell phone, so okay.
Yeah, so I've been trying to keep it alive from timing out, which we are. Okay, good. Jacqueline Farnham, 95 West Street, Rocky Hill, Connecticut, writes in today, Dear Rocky Hill Town Councilors, I am writing to express my support and enthusiasm for Rocky Hill accepting the $737,000 Sustainable Materials Management Grant. It has recently been awarded. I am proud that our town was selected for a program that is beginning to receive support throughout the state. Implementing the SMM grant is a win-win. It will kickstart the process that will save our town hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on waste management and support the generation of clean power. This grant would fund a program that would allow residents to put food scraps into a bag to be collected in the same bin as their normal garbage. The scraps would be sent to the Quantum Biofuel plant in Southington, where it would produce clean energy instead of being shipped to an out-of-state landfill where it will produce methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. As my counselor, I ask that you vote with fiscal and environmental responsibility to accept this grant.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? All right, so we will close public comment, and I will just say for the record, I always hope that people come to the town council. Scary. People come to the town council meetings and participate, so we truly appreciate everyone who has participated this evening. Okay, moving on to appointments and resignations. Do we have any? Generally?
No.
No. Okay.
Nope.
Approval of the minutes A Town Council meeting July 18th, 2022.
Madam Mayor, make a motion to approve the minutes of Town Council meeting July 18th, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Yeah.
I abstain as
Gonna
well.
ask- Okay.
Two
Two
abstentions.
abstentions. Moving on to subcommittee reports, finance.
The Finance Committee did meet. We have 4 items this evening on the consent agenda. The first is the approval of a capital lease for a Bobcat backhoe for the Parks and Rec Department. It's a 4-year lease of $27,422.52. That was part of our budget approval process a few months earlier. The second item on the consent agenda is the tax refund. DeBurr Realty is requesting a refund of $54,625.14. This is a timing refund. They paid both their July and January property tax payment in a single payment. So we're going to refund the other half, which will get repaid back to the town in January, help them with a cash flow. The third item on the consent agenda is our transfer of funds concentration. And this is where we go line item by line item through the budget, zeroing out line items. So money that is over in one account gets zeroed in another account. It has no effect on the overall budget. It's just making the individual line items within balance. And the last item on the consent agenda is the transfer of funds to non-recurring. There were 3 items there. One is for unused road money. The second was for money set aside for the tax assessment. And the third one is $275,000 for the Board of Education for their small projects. So that will be moved, and that's done each year with money that is left over or returned. Also at our meeting, KERMA issued their members' equity distribution payment. We received $51,438. We also reviewed our special revenue accounts, and we'll get an update on 2 of them. The CDBG Small Cities Grant has been sitting idle for many years. Ray is going to look into whether it's still able to be used, some of those funds, or if they have to be returned. The program, I think Ray had said, predates him working for the town, so it's really been sitting idle for a long period of time. Not making you sound old there, Ray.
Much appreciated.
And see if it may be able to be used for some of the upcoming projects we have within the industrial park. And the third one we looked at, and just something that we're to keep in the back of our heads as we're going through really next year's budget, there's a Ruth Wilcox grant, which is a grant to the library for children's educational material. And this particular year, the library didn't need any of those funds because we had money coming through the ARPA program. But that money may be available for future children's educational materials. Also in the month of July, which was after our close of the fiscal year, we received our municipal transfer funds, which pays for the property tax, the motor vehicle tax cap. So we did receive the money. There still is a small donut hole that has to get filled, or that we lose on for the year, because the state uses the prior year's assessed value, not the current year's assessed value. So it's we're 1 year behind on the assessed values. I believe that number is about $140,000. We did receive our annual letter from the auditors that they will be preparing for this year's audit. They will meet with the Finance Committee, as is standard procedure, start a 2-way conversation. And the last piece of information from Finance is we're closing the year with a very small surplus on pre-audited numbers of approximately $50,000. The next Finance meeting is September 8th at 6 p.m.
So the notion of fully reimbursing the municipality for any potential loss relative to this cap hasn't worked for us?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Yeah, so I think it's worked exactly as it was intended. So when we gave our information in for what the values of the motor vehicles were, that was the amount that they were using. What you lose is that small piece of like the supplementals that we start in January. So their formula is based on the October assessments, and then next year we'll pick up that small gap. And because we had a large increase, in our motor vehicle, that we do have that portion of about $140,000, but we did get the full amount according to the state formula of $344,000. So we're on track with the way the grant is, and I think they realized that there will be the other piece that will be absorbed into the next year's grant.
So the $140,000 that we lost.
Just delayed. It will be in for next year's budget, and it will continue that cycle. That there will be a delay in what's received. So we'll get this portion for this year, and then when we give our updated numbers, which will have the supplementals in and so forth, then in next year's grant it will be that much greater. So
Okay.
I've actually tested the formula, and I see it working.
So
Is there a reason?
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you. I had a,
It-
yeah, go ahead.
And so what is the reason though for the delay now that they know it's 140,000? Why can't they give it to us now?
Well, I believe what they were budgeting on was the grand list that we gave, and that's what we needed to be assured when they did the transition is, are you using the grand list? But if we're having any changes beyond the grand list, which is, like I said, those supplemental, motor vehicle supplementals, you'll see, I think last year we had about 800,000 that was in supplementals. So that was after the creation of the formula. And in reaching back to the state, that they do say that we will pick that up in the following year. But I think they just had to
But
use.
when we pick it up in the following year, are we then losing again that year because supplementals will come after the fact, right? So every year we're going to be behind a amount of money.
By a small portion, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you,
I think
Mona.
the portion just seems larger this year because we did have such a large increase in motor
In
vehicles.
the valuations, yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I was a little confused. That's why I was jumping in. So, so are we gonna have a lag, or that lag is gonna be we're gonna catch up to that lag next year?
We should be able to catch up to the lag. I don't want to speak on behalf of the state. I don't know if their intention was to do a phase down of the funding, if it's 100% or not. So, without speaking to what their plans are for the future and phasing it out. But there will be a lag because of the supplementals. We had a very good year for motor vehicle for value, so the lag is a little bit larger. In the following year, assuming that everything stays the same and our grand list isn't growing at the pace that we did this year, then that lag will continue but be much smaller.
Okay.
So would we anticipate getting that catch-up payment during the same fiscal year?
It would be the following. So we got the 344,000 now, which, if you put in like, we'd like to add in our supplementals, it should be 440 or 460, then that piece will always go into the following year.
Okay, so it's not like other grants where we have an amount of money that's chopped up a couple times during the year. This is just one annual payment. And then because of the way they started the program, we should catch up next year. But in the meantime, we have this kind of floating 140.
Right.
Question to Mona on that car tax issue, because isn't the state proposing a certain type of adjustment for appreciation that'll kick in next year, and have we factored that in? Because that's going to change maybe what we're forecasting.
And I think that's exactly what I am saying, is that adjustment that we're missing that's going to be in for next year. So that's just saying the same thing in a different term, but that's exactly what that is.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to government operations.
Government operations has not met since our last meeting. We are next scheduled to meet on Tuesday, September 6th, due to the Labor Day weekend.
Thank you. Public safety?
Sure. Public safety met earlier this evening, and I'll give you the departmental reports. Fire was first. Fire responded to 56 incidents in July, bringing the year-to-date total to 365 responded to. They had training hours of 261. There were 0 firefighter injuries from those incidents, 56 incidences. The total staff is at 67 with 62 active. There was 1 resignation and 1 new volunteer. And I do know that the fire department is taking a good hard look at recruitment and how to raise our level of visibility and recruitment, and they'll be initiating some new plans with regards to recruitment. From a public interaction point of view, an interesting program that the fire department will be helping out with the library, and there'll be a contest of sorts. The winner will get to be driven to school in a fire truck. So our public safety departments like to do public interaction and good works. We don't have anybody out with COVID, and they are following the most current CDC standards for COVID in terms of masking and all of that, but that's going well. There were 7 incidents on our highway that allowed us to, so we had 7 billable responses to the new state program where we're able to get money, and those invoices went out, and it's a billable of about $3,500 back to our fire department for attending those 91 events. The ambulance had a total of 421 calls for the month of July, bringing the total to 2,631. There were a total of 6 canceled calls, 3 of which were no patient contacts, 1 call where it was canceled prior to arrival. We have 72 members. There are 44 active writing members and 9 associate members non-writing. Non-writing is secretarial, administrative staff that are not going out in ambulances to try to provide services. There are 11 probationary members. That means they're in training, and they will be coming on board online as soon as they get through the training. There are 3 medical leaves and 4 leaves for schooling and 1 military leave. We only had 1 opioid-related transport, and we had 1 cardiac arrest transport for the month of July. The Rocky Hill Ambulance embarked on 99 hours of training for the month of July. For the police, in July, there were 3,803 calls for service, bringing our year-to-date total to 27,557 calls. There were 38 criminal arrests, 23 motor vehicle accidents, 9 DUIs, infractions issued 110, and warnings issued 312. If you remember last month, we were around 274 warnings issued, but when you add the 3 with the 110, there were 422 total stops in the town of Rocky Hill, vehicular stops being made. There were 331 training hours for the police department. Emergency management did not give a report. The director is on vacation, but I can tell you that the cooling centers were up and running during the intense part of the heat wave and drought. And we did check in and monitor the library and the community center, senior center, which acted as our cooling centers. They were on regular hours. There were no additional extensions into the evening or to Sundays. So they were regular hours, and it was, all reports are that it was usual crowd shuffled in, usual crowd shuffled out. Everybody was good. We had backup water if we needed it. I think our saving grace was no power outage. That really could have hurt folks. So, but we were up and ready and for that. So we thank them. As for Central Connecticut Health District, they did report that the number of cases year to date is 4,560 COVID cases with a 10.8 positivity rate, kind of a steady rate over the summer. So that's our positivity rate. It was reported by Charles Brown that the pandemic seems to be moving into the endemic disease category. There will be a fall vaccine update, meaning in the fall, the COVID vaccine that will be available and being administered in the fall will be an FDA-approved vaccine updated for the Omicron version, just like other flu vaccines get updated on their best guess of which version is out there for this coming season. Which brings us to the flu season. Just a reminder that flu season is up, and they will be holding clinics. And so they'll be doing walk-in clinic and then 2 drive-up clinics for the flu, and we're expecting the flu season, or they're expecting the flu season to get back to somewhat of a normal. We were fortunate the last 2 years flu season was moderate. So now we're worried a little bit that an uptick, so because we're out and about more. So in October, you should be looking to do your flu, take advantage of the clinics and the drive-through so that you are ready for November and December when it's holiday season and the flu season is upon us. And then I'm just going to mention that Counselor Prakash and I were fortunate to get a ride-along with the Rock Hill PD, the patrol. We both went in separate cruisers for the evening to see what our men in blue actually do on a routine summer night. So we partook in moving violation stops, speeding checkpoints. We did ride along on an ambulance call where the patrol officer was alongside EMTs in the household. And I think Counselor Greenspan was one of your neighbors, and you can attest to how much they appreciated the support of
Absolutely, the professionalism of the police
professionalism. It was a dire situation, so we're thankful for for the care that they gave at that moment. We were then about ready to call it a night and go in, and a call came in for a fire, 295 New Britain Avenue. It's an August report, so it'll be in the August report, but not the July numbers. But we were rushed over to the scene where Counselor Prakash and I were able to observe the incredible interaction between departments, EMT, police, and fire in getting to the scene, controlling it, dealing with it, working together. Very supportive, very intuitive. You might want to add some comments to that. But we think we have, you said it best about community policing.
Yeah, I think it was amazing to see, our frontline officers, our first responders, working closely together as a unit, and it's eye-opening, and it's really satisfying to see that kind of teamwork within our frontline, officers and the first responders in fire and ambulance, and I think we'll be remiss to mention that the RHPD does a great job in what I consider, Mr. Chairman, the professionalism and the community policing, really, which it's just in my view is really a model for how policing should be done throughout our state and our country, hopefully. So I was very honored to be on that. Like you said, very eye-opening and very informative. So I would second your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Definitely.
That's the report, and the next meeting is September 19th.
Thank you. Senior Liaison?
Senior Liaison had a brief meeting July 25th. Really pleased to see the number of programs going on at the new senior center. Not working. So the new senior center is loaded with new programs. Gina provides an update on those. Melissa Hicks and the Senior Services, they have their programs going on. The renter's rebate is still going for any of the seniors under certain income thresholds that are renting properties. They could apply through Human Services. Our last few meetings have been extremely brief. We've had trouble putting an agenda together because it's just really an update. And it's great that we now have the senior center up and running, which is what that committee was. So we are considering at our next meeting taking what is a monthly meeting and turning it into a quarterly meeting. And anytime there's information that needs to be shared, we of course could hold a special meeting to approve or discuss any open items. But instead of having meetings that last 10, 15 minutes, we don't have much of an agenda. It's going to be considered. So if anybody is opposed to doing that, please show up to the next senior liaison meeting on the 22nd of August at 5 p.m. Let us know your opinion. So far, I haven't heard from anybody. Just as, we still do want to hear from people. So tonight we had some people speak at public comments, and that's always another option for people to come whether it be for senior services or senior-related programs. The council meeting's open to everybody. So again, our next meeting will be August 22nd at 5 p.m.
I just want to say I did have an opportunity to speak to a few of the seniors, and everybody thought that was a good idea. I did tell them that they can approach any of us at any time, but especially the people on the Senior Liaison Committee. If they have an issue, we can always ask the chair to hold a meeting, but they seem to be fine with it.
Thank you. That concludes the report.
Land acquisition and farmland preservation.
No meeting, but I can report that fencing has gone up around the Streska farmhouse. And to our historians' benefit, Ed Ciccarillo and myself were allowed in by Ray Carpentino, town staff, just before we started to really quarantine down that house due to pollutants. But Ed and I were able to go through very quickly and garner some artifacts. So those are in possession of the fire department and in storage so that we can decorate the barn and the site when they come out. So things like a corn seeder that's pulled by a horse and so another seeding machine. So some really neat stuff, Ed, and some photographs that probably reach back to some of the other owners of that farm or other relatives that were in ownership of that farm before the Streska name went on it. So the next meeting, so Ray, I don't know if you want to speak to the demolition of the house. Is there an update at this point, just because we had to delay it? Is there something we can report on that?
There really isn't much of it. There really isn't much of an update. The environmental consultant is waiting for a couple of more submittals that the contractor has to submit to them regarding environmental certification. So we're still waiting for that, but it should be very soon. We are guaranteed the house will be down before the end of the month, but more than likely much sooner.
So once work starts, we know it can be a 4-day job.
Yeah.
But we just have been snake bit in trying to get it started. So frustrating, but thank you for the update. And our next meeting is August, Ray, 23rd.
Do we have a special meeting this Wednesday?
Say that again?
Do we have a special meeting coming up?
For farmland?
Yeah.
No.
Thought we'd run. Not a message came through. Oh, good. One less thing to do. Cross it right off my calendar.
Yeah, if the house comes down, we'll have a special meeting.
Yeah.
I'll guarantee that.
We'll bring our champagne.
All right. Thank you. End of report.
Liaison to the state representative and the state senator.
No report?
School.
I just, if I may, just
Excuse me. What?
I have no report from the state senator. Or,
yeah.
I mean,
I was just
so
gonna,
you're
this
not-
is just I noticed myself on the.
I know, but excuse me. In the future, could you, anything that you may want to report, could you head up with the person who's actually giving the report so that we can stay? So we can maybe just connect at some point and get the reports.
I mean, this was just kind of came to me because we were talking about is the insurance, that there were hearings today. That I didn't talk to the state rep, just that I noticed.
Okay, but you're not giving the report respectfully. Respectfully.
Okay,
Okay. Capital Improvements Committee?
Capital Improvement Committee has not met. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 5th.
Oh, good, I was gonna say that. Economic Development Subcommittee. School, I'm Punkage, I jumped right over you. School, I'm so
I was
sorry.
wondering. No,
School
no worries.
liaison, school liaison.
No report, Madam Mayor. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, now we'll go Economic Development Subcommittee.
No meeting, no report.
Okay. Town Manager Search Committee?
Sure. We're making a lot of headway with the Town Manager Search Committee, which is comprised of Councilor O'Sullivan, Councilor Levine, and myself, and staff Dana McGee. And then our outside consultant, again, to remind everybody, SGR, Doug Thomas. So we met in a several-hour meeting, more than 2 hours, in a Zoom format to have Doug Thomas present to us what he's accomplished to date for the town of Rocky Hill. As of today, over 10,000 emails searching out candidates for town manager have been emailed. The applicants that came in from that and are still coming in represent over 13 states. We have to date seen 26 well-qualified applicants, and they went into a pool that the search committee was able to look at. And so the search committee did meet, as I said, with Doug Thomas in a Zoom format, and for more than 2 hours, we were briefed on the, well, there were 25 applicants at that time. A 26th came in after that. But we were briefed on their background and quite a bit about them. We did not meet with them or hear any interviews or anything like that, but those applicants were very well qualified. And so we embarked on the task by the end of that meeting to come down to what we call the semifinalists. The semifinalist pool and it could be any number, it could have been 15, but we ended up with 9 semifinalists from that pool that we want a deeper due diligence and deep dive by SGR and a report back on. In the interim, another good candidate came in, so we have a pool of 10 semifinalists, and we will then meet on August 18th, at which time the subcommittee will be given an applicant book dossier, and our search committee has already received the updated timeline and the last slideshow presentation. Bill, did you get yours? You asked for it. It should be in your email, town email.
Yeah, we just got it.
Yep.
I think we're meeting the 23rd, though.
Yeah, that's what I was just checking.
Well,
I think it's 23rd.
The 18th, the applicant book will be available. We may not meet, but we'll get our applicant book.
Okay.
On August 23rd, we will meet to create our finalist selection. And that doesn't have to be any set number, but we will whittle down the semifinalists to the finalists, and the finalists get recommended to the town council for consideration. So that's how the process is going, and I think we're pretty much lockstep in terms of how it's going and the services we're getting. So we're quite pleased with the way it's going, and we thank Dana McGee for doing that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to consent agenda, items A through D.
Move to
Madam Mayor,
approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Beautiful. Moving on to old business A, discussion possible action ARP funding options. Alan, you usually start us.
I personally don't have any new programs to add at this time.
Okay. Anyone have any comments?
I'm still going to second the idea to let a little bit more money back in for some small businesses, but that's something I guess we have to watch with the budget as we go. But there are definitely a couple small businesses out there that, one or two that may have made app, and the third that would like to, but that's all.
Is there a threshold of demand that we would consider reopening? Not sure if we've talked to the chamber or other groups representing small businesses. I know that there was an idea perhaps we could use a larger sum to do some sort of investment in a business-friendly project. I don't know that we've got ideas on that yet.
Well, it's just that we put money back, right? So we had allotted a certain amount. We didn't use it all. But it takes
Right.
time for people to realize their condition they're in and maybe even to be aware. So it was still up on the website, these three firms that I'm aware of. There might be more than that, I'm not sure, but
Yep.
I just throw it out there as a possibility. But
Yeah, because we didn't deplete the fund that we had set aside. So there's something that I think we're just kind of opening up the window on based on demand, which is why we had closed it. So it's something where if it seems that people need the help, then perhaps we consider opening it up for a couple months.
Just to comment, I'm pretty sure the council reallocated that money that was in that fund for other things. So really, it's not there anymore.
Didn't we set some aside for perhaps a larger project? For-
It was discussed, but no.
That wasn't formally done. So we have our funding of around $1 million. It hasn't been allocated for any task.
Like
Correct.
nine.
Correct.
984.
Yeah,
right.
94.
So potentially, if we wanted to take a portion of that and set it aside for business, we could explore that. if we felt there was demand for another series of grants.
So you could keep your eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, I have 3 applications that came in over the past 3 months. But nothing more. I will monitor that, though.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, discussion, possible action, appointment of Sustainable CT Task Force.
Madam Mayor, I have some handouts for the council.
Thank you.
First one is a draft resolution prepared by our town council. Yeah, and also we do have Morris Boria here, also who did draft that resolution. Perhaps he can give us some background while you're studying this resolution.
Can the public see it as well?
Not at the moment. We don't engage with the public during the meeting. So, welcome, Attorney Boria.
Madam Mayor, how are you? Councilors, we were asked some time ago with regard to the creation of a task force regarding sustainable CT, and we had provided an opinion some time ago with regard to the statutory framework and the authority for that. And we had looked at the Plan of Conservation and Development. And the Plan of Conservation and Development specifically has provisions in it with regard to the creation of a Sustainability and Resiliency Task Force. It is specifically provided for in the plan, and it indicates that the town council would take the lead in appointing that task force. We looked at that, and we looked at the charter as being equivalent to a special committee that you can appoint. I think we cited the charter section in the resolution, which was 303A. And we did it so what we did was, when we were asked to do this, we basically made some decisions with regard to how this would be set up and who would have the authority to do the appointments. And we presented it to the council as a draft, really, for your approval and also for comment. But our recommendation in the form of the resolution that we've done, if you've had a chance to take a look at it, we're recommending the Plan of Conservation and Development with regard to the creation of this task force. It has certain goals, and they line up well with the sustainable CT with regard to the efficient use of resources today and for future generations, so that they're sustainable, and also with regard to preparing for what we would call hazardous type events like floods, where you're looking at mitigating as well as preventing. So those are the things. So you have sustainability, and then you've got the resiliency. Those are the things that the Plan of Conservation and Development is envisioning, and we put together this resolution that would allow you to create a task force to implement those goals that the Plan of Conservation and Development contains, which was passed under a statutory authority under 8-23. So that is the basic framework. You have the Plan of Conservation and Development, and then you have the charter that gives you the authority to do this. Now, you could, as we have suggested, give the authority to the mayor to make the appointment subject to your approval. We've suggested 7 members. It seemed to us that that would be the minimum number that you would need in order to effectively try to implement any actions that you might take pursuant to whatever they might discover that they want to try to do. And we also, in a separate email, and I know that I saw a handout from engineering, that there's been some review with regard to what other towns and what they've looked at. So we did a separate email to the manager where we just kind of outlined the kind of members that you would want to put on this task force and the kinds of backgrounds that we recommended. And we had recommended that the people that are put on the task force, and we recommended 7 voting members to be appointed, and then a non-voting member who is an employee of the town. Either to be designated by the town manager or a member of the specific language that we used was the Community Development Services Department. But the different areas of expertise that we had suggested that the members have would be people who have experience in the fields dealing with public works, trash management and recycling, renewable energy sources, solar, wind, hydro, batteries. People have experience with the Board of Education or parent and teacher organizations, because we find in other communities that having students involved, et cetera, is a great way to promote these programs. And so you need to have relationships with the Board of Ed. You can't just bring this up and think they're going to cooperate. It's better to have them on board from the beginning. Farmland open space preservation, engineering, street and sidewalk layout for walkability, emergency preparedness, and also consider the equitable use of resources, which we had indicated somebody from social services or along those lines. All of these areas, we know from our experience in other towns, are areas that you need to address, or that you could not need, that you could address in trying to achieve the goals of the Sustainability Task Force. So what we did was we prepared a resolution. We've also indicated that we would like to, under the terms of the resolution, this is what we're recommending to you. Now, obviously, you can amend it or change it or adopt it or tell us, what you want us to do. But under the terms of the resolution, the way we've drafted it, the task force would have to have an organization meeting within 30 days of the membership being approved by the council. We would send proposed bylaws. We had indicated that we thought that the proper officers for this task force would be a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. I don't think they need a treasurer. And that the bylaws would have the rules for the membership, the officers, et cetera, that the town attorney would draft that, and that they would then adopt, with revisions, however they wanted to adopt them for their committee, only subject to the approval for legal form by a town attorney that the bylaws meet, that the legal form is appropriate. And that they then have to report every 6 months. So the initial report's within 6 months, and then every 6 months thereafter, they would report to the town what activities or programs that they're considering or actions that they're taking to promote sustainability and resiliency. So that was the general framework that we put in. We tried to put all this into a resolution, and we tried to cover a lot. And this is the first time that I've really, come in front of you to really talk about it. We talked about it once before, I think, but not in any kind of great detail. We had this in front of you. So that's what we have put together. Those are our comments. I'm sure you're going to have questions. I thought that you would. And so that's why I'm here. And I'm sure that you might want to hear from the rest of the folks too. But right now, I'm here to answer any questions with regard to the resolution we drafted.
So I think we probably need time to process it and read it. And so, I don't know that we can sit here and process and read, because sometimes, so but if anyone wants to make a comment generally, from the council, then certainly, while Attorney Boria is here, it might be a good time. Otherwise, we can discuss it amongst our caucuses.
Yeah, we had sent it in draft, and as you know, we sent it last week originally, but we then made some edits because we had some feedback from the manager, and so we didn't really get it into final form, I think, until Friday afternoon. And so you might not have had enough time, as the mayor's indicated, to really look at it. It is relatively long and dense, the way we wrote it, because we tried to cover a lot of stuff. So,
yeah, go ahead, Ray.
May I? Just for informational purposes, even though the committee could be composed of like 7 or 9 individual committee members. It does not, I think the intent is not to preclude that committee from using a number of volunteers to help
Right.
put
Yeah.
things together.
The
correct?
point was yes. I thought that 7 would be the probably the least number you could have to run things, and then have consultants, other volunteers, other members, but to have the 7 voting members to basically run it, and then the committee. We try to make it. The bylaws will address what they can actually do. But we would envision that they would be able to have other members happen, because the experience in other towns has been that when they've done these projects, depending on what the project is, they're going to need help from somebody in town staff that can help them implement it, that has the expertise or the resources to do it. So obviously, if you're doing a highway thing or a streetscape thing or any of these things, you're going to need somebody, on town staff. So we would envision that, and we do. I mean, the draft bylaws are closely to the ones that was done for the PIC committee. I don't know if you've seen those in the past. I know that the deputy mayor had sent those. So those are the ones that we'd used, basically, that we're going to use for this, but not the same. They're going to be different. They're going to be changed. But if you saw those, that was the basic framework that we looked at.
Actually, I have a question. So, still trying to process, as everybody said, but I want to, if you can comment a little bit about the relationship between the committee, their voting members, the council, and the mayor. How does it look like? Can you walk me through an example of what they will vote on, and how will that play out in relationship to the council and the mayor?
Okay, so what this is a task force that's going to suggest actions and recommendations. This task force doesn't have any power, all right? So they're going to have to come back, and if they decide that they want to do a project, okay, we decided that we can do something that's walkable, all right? So we're going to do some kind of a street, sidewalk, greenway, et cetera, okay? So that by itself, even if they get concepts and they get plans, they don't have funding, they don't have authority to do anything. All they can do is suggest policies, projects, and they're going to have to come and figure out how to fund those and how to get those authorized. And that's why they're a task force. They don't have regulatory authority. They're a way to organize people. So you could have, some towns have design review. Okay, before they do projects, and once again, they're just giving input. This is the same kind of thing, even though this is much more global and it's very specific with regard to the main things in the plan of conservation and development were renewables. Looking for different ways to conserve energy, different energy sources, and also to be prepared for emergencies. That as we go forward, we're going to see more and more extreme events, and the town needs to be prepared for those in both preventing and then mitigating. So with regard to like floods is an easy example. You can build a wall, whatever, or then you can be prepared to pump it out, afterwards type of thing. But that's the type of stuff that the committee's going to have to look at, consider, get input, and then make recommendations. But at the end of the day, it'll be up to you to decide what kind of action you want to take, if you want to fund it or not, how you're going to fund it. They might be able to establish public-private partnerships where part of the money comes from the private sector and part of it's funded by the government. I'm just giving many examples of what a task force could do. It's really hard to,
I think my only concern, and I honestly haven't read through the entire thing, is just that I don't know how much of this is usurping the authority of PIC, potentially, and do we need to include limiting language that this task force is specific to sustainable CT, and its authority comes from the POCD, but its mission is not to carry out POCD things. We have PIC for that, but this is limited to carrying out actions pursuant to sustainable CT. So there very well may be, months or years, hopefully not, where there is inaction because we're in between certifications, or maybe there's a big project that's happening, but really the goal is to work on the certifications.
So what we did was, in the plan of conservation and development, there are two different bodies. One of them is the PIC committee, which is established by planning and zoning.
Okay.
And is much broader, and it has the mandate of implementing all of the plan of conservation and development recommendations, which go well beyond sustainability and resiliency. There's a specific section on sustainability and resiliency, and that specific section is what also then says that you create a specific sustainability task force. So that was the section I used in the plan of conservation and development to find the statutory authority to create this. So that was created under 823, you have a conservation development, and then under the charter, I put those together, and to me, you have the authority to do this between those. And what we did was we took and we combined the goals of both. Plan of conservation development, which is sustainability and resiliency, and then the sustainable CT. So we put both of those goals into the resolution, because we tried to do both. But we can certainly, I think they're consistent, and we did not, the PIC is a much broader umbrella group that has to implement, there's about 20 different things in the plan of conservation and development that they would, that they could be addressing. This is just one of many. And there's no mutual exclusivity. In other words, if you're a member of PIC, if you were a member of that committee, which was created by planning and zoning, you could still, there's nothing to prevent you from being a member of this committee to be appointed by the town council. There's nothing to prevent that. And if the person was willing to do, that much, if they're willing to take the appointments. Obviously, they have to accept the appointments, but there'd be nothing to prevent that. But I can make it more specific if you'd like. I mean, that's part of the process, so, we can edit however you'd like us to, but we weren't sure about that, so that's kind of how we went on both of them.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm in school.
I know, I'm doing, there's a lot, there was a lot more there than you might imagine.
So with these types of task force, right, one of the concerns I have in listening to them over the number of years that I've been volunteering in one capacity or another is when you get a group like this together and then they can build up like a frustration in moving things along, right? Because there's procedure and process and all that. So so right away I would think that how does this task force understand that whatever they're working on, can they work with, like I would think P&Z would be kind of a major if it's something major that they're gonna suggest working on and funding and blah, 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 and we have to consider. I mean, it's got to pass through planning and zoning like any project. Right. So I'm just wondering how, I guess maybe that wouldn't be articulated in the resolution, but how do we keep this task force from being frustrated by needing various inputs from all over the place?
It really depends on who you appoint. So just appoint the right people that are going to show up to do the job, and it should not be a problem, with all due respect. So
I don't think that's not the concern.
But I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to be flip about it, but you get people in that know what they're doing, that have experience in the field, that are going to be focused. If you don't do that, I don't think there's any process that's going to save you from having that problem.
I don't think that's the concern, though. I mean, we have a number of those people in the room who have been volunteering with the existing committee, and there have been ongoing items that they have been working on. And I think we want to make sure, and I agree that we don't want to try to joint write the resolution, and that it makes sense to give some time. Also, there's some things that we probably want to bring it in line with other committees that we have or similar entities in town. But I think what we're trying to do is formalize something that already exists and make it more in line with lasting group that will work with the town and help connect this group with the town's resources so they can more efficiently carry out their tasks. Some of the things that we mentioned, I agree with the mayor that defining the scope of what they're doing, tying it back to sustainable CT, the 13 very specific things that they work on, which are broad but also defined, that would be very useful, because some of the things we already have a PIC committee, we already have planning and zoning, we have an emergency management director. I don't think that the volunteers engaged with this committee will be helping us build, seawalls to keep the river away. So I think it's more just about how do we line up what's actually happening and give it an efficient way of working with the town so we can actually keep making progress against our sustainable CT goals.
The seawall thing was an example. It was illustrative. They'd be easy to understand. That's why I used that. I wasn't. It wasn't a serious example.
Okay.
If I may, yeah, but just, Chris kind of stole my thunder, picking up on that, because, I think we need a better sense of what niche is this group supposed to fill. I mean, I was kind of picturing things like, recycling awareness days at the schools, and you're talking about studying the levee system to prevent us from a cataclysmic
Once again,
flood.
that was just an
Well,
example.
I don't mean to hold you to that too literally, but those are very, very different levels of commitment and expertise and resources we're talking about here. And I'm glad you gave that example, so that, it may help us understand the need to focus this a little bit more, for people to understand really what type of projects are we talking about here, and therefore what type of skill sets and commitment
And that's
we're
why this
looking
was
for.
sent as a draft for comment. That was the purpose of it. So we're getting the comment now. I'm more than happy to change it.
And I think you're both accurate, because the whole purpose of this was adding structure and a way for this. We have this grassroots incredible group that really lacks the structure and wants to have the partnership with the community to work on those 13 actions. And so we're just trying to provide that for them, right? So I think, I appreciate certainly that you have put everything into this, because it's easy for us to then take it apart as opposed to having to add stuff to it. So it's a great draft, and I think we just need to hone it
And
down.
that
When
was
we
my
know what we want to do, so we'll get to that. For the next meeting, we'll have something worked out, and I'm sure Ray will send it back to you. But you probably want to comment.
Yeah, just my last comment.
Okay.
The purpose is to work with Sustainable CT, the organization. So this committee will be working with them, and there'll be oversight by a town staffer who will be the liaison between the committee and the town, and this staff person is knowledgeable in Sustainable CT anyway. So that person will also be a liaison from the task force to CT, to Sustainable CT also. So, the purpose is to implement and become certified, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's the goal of this task force, is to do that, and it will afford structure. So we'll have a direct connection to the committee, to the town, through the staffer, into Sustainable CT. That's the whole purpose. So it gives us structure and a format for the subcommittee to work, whether with the town or independently with CT Connecticut, but back through that staffer to the town.
Yeah, I
don't know
think
if that
that's
makes
excellent.
sense or not.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And just not to belabor, because I think we probably will only need maybe a few revisions to get it done. But is there any specific date that we need to have it wrapped up by? Is this just us kind of getting our house in order, or is there something that the Sustainable CT is looking for?
No, but September 5th, that Monday, we're off, yes, because that's Labor Day. So maybe we can just agree here that if we have maybe a couple of weeks to kind of talk amongst ourselves, right? And maybe you guys can kind of just work out what you're thinking, and then we can give something to Ray.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then give it back
I
to
can put it
Morris,
into
and
the
then
proper form, no
our
problem.
next meeting on the 19th, we should have a final draft resolution, and we can give it another look over, and any adjustments, we can make adjustments. And we hate to belabor it, but
Yeah,
I think that's the easiest way, absent a special meeting, right?
Yeah, I think that approach makes sense. Then it would get out in the packet and all that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just have one little question though, on the 6-month reports. I assume that's a minimum, that they have to do it every 6 months, but if there was some topic that came up, let's say at month 3, and they felt they needed to come to the council, they maybe have an opportunity for a grant, I assume they're not precluded from doing that?
Not
It's
the
a
way,
minimum,
no, it was an attempt to have a minimum schedule that we just
Yeah, that's what-
made up the numbers. As I said in the email that I sent, I made up the numbers. It's up to the council to decide these. These are suggestions.
I thought that was just the minimum, yeah.
And just as a clarification, the email you sent, I don't believe went to the full council.
It may not have.
Okay, because I have
Not
not
have.
seen it until tonight.
Yeah,
We keep
so
referencing
it may not
something
have.
that I haven't seen.
I thinkRay and
that's fine. I just wanna
council are
make sure
going
that-
back as of
No, that's not
Friday,
missing
so.
something.
I was just
Okay.
trying to make the point
The
that we
email that he
drafted
sent
this
was actually that
with the
resolution.
purpose of getting
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
It was a draft. That was the purpose of sending it, to start the conversation.
Okay.
Okay, so since this document was not in our packet, will it be presented to the public, will it be posted on the town website, or is some way made available for the public to see?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so as part of the next meeting packet, I assume? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, is there any other questions?
I think not.
We all set?
We are so set.
you
Thank
very
you
much,
very,
guys.
very much for your time. And thanks for all this. It's very complicated. It seems so easy, and it's like bizarrely complicated. Okay, let's just get organized. And we are going to move on to C, discussion, possible action, appointments to Memorial Committee, which is also known as the Naming Committee.
Madam Mayor, we don't have all the appointees yet, so we don't have a full committee for you to appoint tonight, so I guess it'll have to be at the next meeting. But we do know that Minority Caucus has forwarded Mimi Thoreau to be on the committee, and I've been put on that naming committee for the Majority Caucus. And the ordinance calls for, so we're following the town there actually is an ordinance for memorials and namings, and it requires us to go, both caucuses to go out and get one at-large citizen of Rocky Hill from their party affiliation and add them, so that brings it to 4. And then one staffer to be appointed by the town manager to assist the committee. And then, of course, applications come in to name something or memorialize something that is actually existing. So, and then they can make, I guess, the recommendation to council to vote on it. But we have, again, Mimi, myself, we do have our volunteer at large, but Chris, you're not
We're waiting for confirmation.
ready. And Ray has a staffer in mind, but he can make that at the later date.
Yeah, I prefer that we do it all in one shot, so it's not, all. But just for everyone, we're trying to put together what we, I guess, call the naming committee, but that's not the real name. It's called the Memorial Committee, because we just have so many different things kind of hanging out there. The farm, a room. Was there another one?
So
Something else came in.
So we have a
The
conference
barn
room
when the mold
naming,
eats
and we
stuff.
have the barn up at the Streska, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's section 36 of the town ordinance dictates the process.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get that process rolling, and so for our next meeting, we will make those appointments. Yeah.
Just a quick question, because I was looking for it on the town site. To get the naming form, if someone from the public has an idea for naming a room, anything, I guess, is the form available on the website for download, and then they contact the town manager? I couldn't find it. Maybe I missed it, but do you know how someone gets that form?
We had people calling John's office in the past.
Yeah, I think
But we
either John had them or, we can make it available online very easily.
I could get one over to you. I think it is available. I remember hunting around and getting it.
Online?
Yeah, online. I'm pretty sure. I'll get
Yeah,
it over to you.
that'd be great. That way folks have got a good idea they can contribute. Because as far as I understand it, the naming committee, the memorial committee, will be reviewing the names that the public submits. They're not coming up with names themselves.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
the better names they get, the better names they can pick.
Yeah. Okay, we're good on that. Moving on to D, update CT Deep SMM grant. I gotta find that paperwork. Okay, do you
Want me to?
you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, as we all know, the good news is the town did get the grant. It has been awarded, for the pilot program. And as we all know, everybody in the town and the town council is supportive of recycling and waste reduction. The not so good news is there is what was termed a speed bump earlier tonight, as there may be a conflict with the town's obligations under the current waste contract with Murphy Road. So before we jump into anything that will put us in a disadvantage liability-wise, we are just doing our due diligence with the town council to make sure that if there is a conflict, what we can do, and if there isn't a conflict, great, and what our liability is. You know, if we're going to be running into a conflict, if it's going to cost us money in legal fees and what have you, we just need to know that now before we jump into anything.
Okay, so I think where we had left this last time is we were going to apply because we were under the gun, and that we would reserve a decision till a later date because we didn't know if we would actually receive the grant. Now we've received an award of a boatload of money to carry out something that we've been working on for a long time. But we, you know, I guess we have to do some due diligence. So we will do our due diligence, and
Just table.
it's tabled.
Do we have to take affirmative action to accept the grant, or have we just won it because we applied and then
Well,
we're figuring out how to proceed?
Like any grant, I'm sure state grant, there will be a ton of paperwork, and an assistance agreement will have to be executed.
I'm sorry, just to I mean, do we have a council have to vote to accept the grant, or is it just we have been awarded it and now we have to expend or decide on how to proceed?
I think we have to table it because if we accept it without doing our due diligence, then we are putting
Obligated to
forth
spend it in a certain way.
we have to do the program as it is written, and we cannot reallocate a portion of that money for any other endeavor.
And do we know what our deadline for action is? and how
No,
long-
because Deep hasn't said anything. They're just,
But I can investigate that easily.
yeah.
Okay, just to make sure, because we have that a month before we meet again. I said we could do a special meeting if we had to, if it does work out our way.
Yeah.
Just didn't know if we had a timeline for how long that due diligence we expect taking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do we know if there are other towns that are similarly situated? So, I mean, if there's, a joint looking into this, or does Deep have any insight into this, their attorneys?
There are some other towns who applied for this grant. Some have accepted, some have not. Some are probably actually doing some of the activities under that particular grant.
Do we know if they have the similar contract? I'm just wondering if there's anybody else, or is Deep aware of this? I mean, just get all the help we can get, I guess, in figuring out what we are able to do and not able to do.
Yeah, that I don't know about what contracts they have with waste hauling. I'm not familiar with that, with what other towns are doing. But, if need be, we can also find that out too. And I'm sure our town council will probably will help us do that also.
Town attorney, you mean?
With
Yeah.
S, yeah. Council with an S.
Sounds good. All right, any questions?
I think we have to move to table.
Well, it only says update on the agenda, so I don't know if there's anything to table.
Let's see.
It's not true, it's not date.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
It's discussion, possible action.
Mine's his update.
Yeah,
Agenda
just
just
as
says
update.
Yeah.
No, no.
That's right, just an update. Yeah, so we're
There's really
good.
nothing to table, right?
Nope.
We did the update, so.
We did do the update. Well, there you go. Okay, moving on to new business discussion, possible action, ordinance to direct spending of nip bottle funds. So let me give you a little history of this one. So there is the nip bottle law that went into effect, right? And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the program through DEEP, there were about 37.6 million nips sold in the state of Connecticut between October and April. And through the nip bottle program, Connecticut municipalities netted $1.8 million to tackle litter and the nuisance in their communities as a result of these nip bottles not being redeemable, so they just get thrown everywhere. In April, we received our first round of funding, and what we do with this money is left largely to local leaders as long as we use it one of two ways. The first way is for environmental measures to decrease the generation of solid waste, and the second way is to decrease litter. Now that the legislative session is over, CCSMM with whom we have signed on as a municipality, has established new working groups and new committees, and we make recommendations for the next legislative session. One of the committees that I signed up myself and Councilor Sullivan for is the reusing and reducing, that has to do with recycling. And one of the things that we talked about at our first meeting last week is that it seems that some of the towns have already swept their nip bottle money into their general funds, which is discouraging because sometimes it can get lost there. And I don't want to see that happen when there is a new administration, years down the road, who may not be as environmentally conscious as this administration is. And presently, there is no deadline as to when we can use the money. And many of us would like to see that remain. We don't want there to be, a rule coming from the state that says, okay, here is your $20,000 for this budget, and you have to use it in this budget. Because sometimes we may want to save for something that is related to the statutory purpose, and that can take a couple of years. But there's also no oversight mechanism that the state has to ensure that municipalities are using the funds properly. They can tell you how to do it, but there's really no oversight. So I wanted just to bring up for discussion the possibility of creating an ordinance very simply that says, and Alan could probably say it better in accounting terms, but what I'm thinking is, making sure that the money stays in a certain line for this specific use, and also that if we want it to carry over to the next budget, that, the council be allowed to carry it over to the next budget, but it cannot go into like another fund, and I don't know what you would call that. But, it's just sort of directing that use. And I know that West Hartford is in the process of drafting a similar ordinance. So I could always reach out to the mayor over there and see if she might want to share that with us. So I throw that out there.
We have a
Getting ideas sounds like a good project for the Sustainability Task Force, actually. It sounds like it could be right in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But I support the idea. What you're saying is some type of sequestration or earmarking of the funds, because you never know when the state may come up with an auditing concept or program anyway. So you may as well be ahead of the curve there. But also it's just the right thing to do. And I like the idea of perhaps rolling money over for a period of years. It may be that you want to buy a piece of equipment or something that's related to this type of work that you need a few years worth of revenues for, that sort of a thing. But I do think it dovetails well with what we were discussing about sustainability.
May I just?
Yeah, please.
For clarification.
Yeah.
So with us in Rocky Hill, this is a special grant, and it goes into a special revenue fund, and that's actually where this $11,000 was resting last year. And I know as Alan's quite familiar, and Jeff as well as our special revenue fund report that we're doing now, you'll see that come forward, and in fact, it's on your list as a special revenue fund. Special revenue funds come in for a purpose, are expended for a purpose. They don't go to your general fund. They stand alone with their own coding. And just to reassure everyone that when it's a special revenue fund, it goes through an extra step in the audit process called the single audit. And we have that with things such as your town aid road money, your LoSEP money. That means that those items are selected and they have to be matched up for the purpose. So that kind of gives you that rest of comfort. It will show up in a single audit report. The dollar amount will be there if expended, and it'll be coded for the source revenue that it came in.
So we can follow it.
It's in a good place, and it's there for its purpose, and it's named that way.
And it carries over.
Yes, it does. It has no end.
So we may just be all set.
So, so what about, just to the earlier concern, those other towns that have swept it or potentially misallocated it, what separates us from them? Are we just applying our accounting principles more stringently? And
I will leave it at that. Yes, I'm very good at what I do.
All right for us.
Okay. Well, that must be why we get all those plaques on the
Chris, just stickers now.
Stickers.
I know.
Frugal.
So you think, Mona, we're good then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
you are.
good. Yeah, because I was just concerned. All right,
Yeah.
good. Well, I think
I
we
mean,
have
of
one
course,
less
I
thing
would
to.
say, yeah, any recommendations on how to use that is always welcome, because we have the definition of what its purpose is, and if anyone had any recommendations, I know town manager and Public Works and I have already sat and said, this is what it is, and that's what it's for, but, it's open for recommendations as well.
Perfect. Phew, okay. Where are we? Discussion, possible action, Connecticut General Statute 824, request town road acceptance Gardner Way. So I know we have something in our packet about this.
Yes. This goes back to when CREC was approved and constructed. A road called Gardner Way, a cul-de-sac, was constructed at the same time. That construction has been completed, and as part of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval process, you can see in the attached memo from Kim Ritchie, Town Planner, the required agreement documents, maintenance agreement has been filed also in the Town Clerk's office. So with that, this is just a typical town road acceptance that you have gone through many times in the past when approving subdivision construction in the roadway within the construction of that, within that subdivision.
I recall discussing this, don't you, Councilor Duff?
There was open
Long
space
time
involved
ago.
in this a while ago, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the tail end of this, I think.
Mm.
And basically the road has been completed and accepted, and we are taking over the maintenance of the road moving forward. This is now a town road.
The road has been constructed to town specs and approved by town engineering department in the town. It has not been accepted. Town council accepts the road.
Right. Well, that's
Yes,
what this is. From.
that's what this is. So the maintenance agreement has also been filed in the town clerk's office.
You're looking for a motion
Looking
to
for
accept the
the
I don't
resolution.
know. Everyone looks like they're kind of reading it, so I'm just trying to be
So,
patient.
is this more of a formality? Are there any
Yes.
issues we need to, or everything's been kind of taken care of? We just got to.
Yeah, it's been constructed, taken care of. It's the formality to accept the road as a town road.
Okay. You want to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to accept the resolution as stated in our packet, authored by Kim Ritchie with regards to the Gardner Way for a total length of approximately 1,275 linear feet, as shown on the subdivision plan entitled Map of Re-Subdivision of Land of Gardner's Nurseries Incorporated, Brook Street, Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And now, subsection C, discussion possible action resolution to maintain and improve pollinator pathway, which is in your packet. So this is a very short resolution that ensures that the town is putting its best foot forward in terms of its pollution mitigation strategies and making sure that we are not using pesticides when we don't need to be using pesticides, and encouraging the creation of pollinator pathways, which we have a little bit started. They don't necessarily have to connect, but I think the vision is at some point that they would connect. I believe that Mr. Ciccarello put this together, and so we want to thank him for that. And we know that we have someone else who is very big, who spoke earlier in public comment, very big on pollinator pathways, who has contributed to this as well. And so we want to thank them, as well as our sustainability volunteers, for supporting this resolution. I don't know, shall we make a motion and then we can discuss?
Oh, yeah, sure. It did come up in the farmland subcommittee with
Okay.
regards to Streska Farm, and planning out the different parcels of that, and would there be a piece that could be a pollinator? Is it close enough to connect, right? They have to connect with other towns or other pollinating, like wildflowers and stuff like that. But we have to be careful not to infringe on the right of the farmers who have a lease for the property, and they are using fertilizers and pesticides. So I see that.
But do you want to make a motion so we
So
can
I'll make a
discuss it?
motion to, I'll make a motion to accept the resolution of Pollinator Pathway as outlined in this August 15th, 2022 resolution.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I just have a quick question. I don't know who to direct it to, but and this is really just a question. So the clause in here about addition of clover to grass and lawns to reduce mowing, is clover as tough of a ground cover as grass? Like if people are walking on it, I find like if I get clover on my lawn, it gets walked on. It kind of loses everything where grass doesn't in there. So are we gonna have an erosion issue if we start adding clover to lawn in areas? Or yeah, that's that's why I didn't know who to ask the question.
Well, I know that we can say that, the various departments have been involved in reviewing this, and the town
Been
manager
approved by
did
Parks.
bring it to, reviewed it with Parks and Rec and the director there. So I think that would have been brought up if that
Yes.
was an issue.
Yes, yeah, it was reviewed. This was reviewed with with Craig Bowman, Parks and Recs, and in fact, he made sure that he was comfortable with everything
So
before
Walt's
we
good
brought
with
it
it?
forward.
Okay.
Craig is.
Walt's good.
Yeah, Walt's happy.
They're good with it.
The only thing that I am concerned with, and I see this in all of the resolutions, so it's not unique to this one, and I know that it is a part of the Pollinator Pathway movement to include this, but I am concerned about encouraging that folks mow every 2 to 3 weeks in certain areas. I think that's too vague. I don't know if that should be narrowed to town property, because I don't know that we want to encourage folks not to mow the lawn at their business or their homes for potentially 3 weeks, and then it's very long, and then they get warnings from their neighbors, and that can be complicated. Though I understand why. I just think we need to figure out where are we talking about who's not going to mow their lawn for 2 to 3 weeks.
So this is just town property, right? This isn't
Correct.
private property,
Right.
right? This-
Well, it does.
And as far as the encourage, I mean, it's can be, I guess, as forceful or unforceful as the encouragement is. I think if people did go out and mow once a week, the Pollinator Resolution police wouldn't come out and tell you to put your grass back.
I mean, I think it's saying
No, but
that
I'm-
reduction, they're trying to give the reason why they're adding clover, where really, it probably should just say the addition of clover to grass with the goal of reducing the need for mowing, but maybe not get that specific because.
But
like
where
you-
does
you
this
went-
say this is limited to town property?
Well, I don't know if we can make a resolution about private property, can we?
It's
think-
a
I think that we
recommendation.
could.
It's a,
Right.
it's part of, it's, the way I read the resolution, it's a recommendation
To whom?
to the town, for the town.
Town of
for our
Rocky
on-town
Hill.
property, and also for the community.
That's how I read it,
Second
to the
whereas, I
community,
think
and that's
says.
where I get worried that 3 weeks of not mowing your grass as a business or a resident is going to create problems with neighbors. It just is.
Well, it does
So,
say, I'm sorry to cut you
Yeah,
off.
no, I
It's-
just want to make sure we avoid that.
It does say in certain areas, so I think that's, you can let your backyard go longer than, the front yard, or if there's an area you need a pathway. So I don't know if we want to say certain appropriate areas or some, play with that language a little bit, if that's that's a concern, because I'm sure we don't want, especially with ticks being an issue, we don't want to have, really high grass.
The bus stops,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily someone's front yard. So Counselor O'Sullivan, and you can work up a magic sentence.
Well, do we want to limit it to town properties? I mean, we could
Well, I
just,
don't know, we can discuss it.
yeah. Well, we're just, I was thinking about maybe
Second
perhaps
whereas
making a
already
friendly
did.
amendment to the motion to approve.
Actually,
And change the language that says in certain areas, to change that to on certain town properties, something like that. So then you're limiting it to town property?
Certain town properties as identified, not.
To certain, to certain.
We can't enforce this on, we have leases on town land with the farmers, they're gonna use pesticides. I mean, we cannot violate that.
Right.
We would not want to.
Has exception for farms, so presumably that would apply.
Yeah, we put an exception
It's
for
in
farms
already.
in there already.
Yeah, there.
If you go down to the, therefore be it resolved, it really hones in on the town. The
Town of
town of
Rocky
Rocky
Hill.
Hill and Parks Recreation Ground crews will strive to maintain, create, and improve.
How about inappropriate town properties as identified by town personnel?
Now, when we do that, Mr. Duff, are we really limiting this? Yeah.
I think the intention of this is to help encourage folks to take parts of their lawns that might not be, that might just be grass, and encourage that to be people to do native plantings like shrubs or perennials that they mentioned that could be pollinator areas. And I think the aspiration is that if you're going to build a pathway across town, it's just not going to use town property. We can't be
Right.
Prescriptive about how people do that. I think this is a goal to have, and then perhaps we could have resources on file for homeowners, which I think we may already have. I remember when I was on Open Space, we had certain things around native plantings, and it might be good to have that available for folks who are looking to make those changes themselves. But I don't think someone's going to come by and forcibly cut your grass, or put a new flower bed of coneflower or something in there to attract the pollinators. So I don't know how. I mean, we could say certain low visibility areas. There's some sort of word there that I think captures what the essence of what we're looking for, where you don't want it to be unsightly or a risk.
I just think it can't be in someone's front yard or in the front of a business.
Yeah.
Because it's.
Or why don't we just say reduction of mowing? I mean, right now, the lawns are brown, and you're not,
Yeah.
if you were gonna do it every 2 weeks, you wouldn't have anything there. So I think if we just say reduction, and then maybe
Yeah.
if we put something in, pursuant to safety, I mean, you're gonna have ticks and things like that, so you don't want your grass to get too high, but you want to encourage the people to do this. And we have clover in our yard, and I actually noticed some bees around it, and I was actually happy to see them. When my husband mows, that area doesn't grow as much as where we have the taller grass, where we have the picnic tables, that he mows that, or he'll weed whack and kind of leave some of those areas. So I think you should leave it up to the homeowners, but if you want to put something in just to, maintain public safety or something, that you don't want grass that you don't want your, pets and your kids getting ticks, so.
I mean, I think it's getting a little too specific. I mean, I'm gonna take myself for example. Okay, I mow with a battery powered mower that I charge with solar power. I can mow every week, and I'll with the zero emission, and I'll say that my mowing is much less a problem on the environment than someone who mows with a gas powered mower every 2 to 3 weeks. So I don't know if we should get overly specific about how often somebody should mow, because we don't know what method they're using to mow. They could be using a manual mower. So I think we got to be careful going down the slippery slope of just assuming one thing when it's not really the
Just say
case.
a reduction.
The reduction of unnecessary mowing, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, no, I could mow every 3 days, and I'll use much fewer
but it-
emissions than the guy mowing with gas every 3 weeks.
I don't think it's
Still
about the
want them
emissions.
to have
though.
a
I don't think it's about the emissions as much as it is, because this is pollinator specific. I mean, you're right about the cleanliness of your mowing, but I think this is about creating the conditions for pollinators that will come there. So you have clover and flowers, that encourages the different bees and butterflies and stuff. Whereas if it's just grass,
Okay, but again, we have flower beds everywhere, so I don't need.
Right,
So
right.
I'm just concerned we're going down a slippery slope. We're trying to define what people should be doing when everyone's situation may be a little bit different, and I don't want to have an unintended consequence when people are trying to do the right thing, and then we're trying to tell them to do something else. When there's
I
no
just
reason.
want to avoid the neighbors fighting with neighbors who they don't get along with, and I want to avoid, renters of commercial property saying, well, I'm just going by your guidelines, and I want a pollinator pathway when they clearly don't want a pollinator pathway. They just don't want to pay their landscaper. I mean, and these are the things like, seriously, that Kim Ritchie and those guys are going to have to deal with, and we've left it vague and uncertain. So that's my concern.
Can I just jump in for?
Yes.
Okay. From the very beginning, this is geared and zeroes in on the town. Whereas the town of Rocky Hill, whereas we strive to include and protect native plant and tree species on town property. The next whereas the town of Rocky Hill uses integrated pest management techniques, whereas the town of Rocky Hill plans to maximize pollinator protection, whereas with the exception of farms, we encourage the addition of clover. And if you want to do lawns and/or the reduction of mowing, you can end it right there and then continue. And if you keep going, whereas, and then now therefore be it resolved that the town of Rocky Hill and its park and recreation grant, this is all geared towards town property.
I agree, but when you say we encourage, you don't have to encourage yourself. So you're clearly encouraging someone, which leads me to believe you're encouraging the town, which are
And we'll
the
make effort
residents
to.
and businesses.
Say
That's
reduction
how
of
I
mowing
read
if-
it.
if feasible.
Can I try something here?
Yeah.
More language here? So how about we change it to the following? Whereas with the exception of farms, we encourage the addition of clover to grass lawns and/or the increase of ground cover that does not require frequent mowing.
I think it's the same thing.
Was clover the only one? Or are there other? Well, I think, isn't that the idea, though, reducing the mowing is that you want to encourage well, I'm not really sure what that is then, I guess. Aside from clover, I don't know what else that could mean.
And I will note that even with the dry lawns, if you check the index on your phone, I mean, grass pollens, there are such thing as grass pollens, and they are very high. They have been having spikes during this drought of grass pollens.
So-
Are we trying to eliminate grass pollens?
Or we should say
No, I think I think the purpose of this is that you're trying to
implement.
remove as much as possible the certain types of lawns that rely on like fertilizers and high mowing, or high management of resources. So either be pesticides, fertilizers, watering, things like that create an unnatural
That'll affect
landscape
other
that,
pollinator areas downline.
where it's bright green but nothing lives in it. I think that's the intention of what they're trying to do there. If we could potentially look at something like Bill mentioned, where we encourage the adoption of techniques to reduce, I don't know, the frequency of
I don't know, so.
grass management or something like that. But
In the absence of a friendly amendment, should I withdraw my motion to approve and just let us keep discussing?
Is there someone on staff maybe who can give us some advice, maybe better advice on this? I mean, we're being amateur agronomists here.
I think the proper wording, I think, which will do it, I hope, comes from our finance director. Whereas with the exception of farms, the town will use the addition of clover to grass lawns and/or the reduction of mowing once to two every 3 weeks in certain areas on town property. So everything is related to town property.
We wouldn't be encouraging,
We
it's
wouldn't be
the
encouraging
town
anybody.
will.
Right, that's just what the town's
That's what
doing
the
on their
town
own
would
property.
focus doing.
So can you read that again?
Because,
Where-
people could do what they want to do in their lawns, and there's no grass police necessarily, unless it's a huge problem. So through the task force, they can always talk about, hey, you can do this in your backyard, or hey, you can connect.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I think that's probably the intention, would be, we're going to set an example. People can choose to follow it to whatever extent makes sense to them.
And we're not encouraging as a council for people to let their grass grow.
Yeah, use your mowing judgment.
Use your mowing judgment, yes.
We actually have an ordinance where, from the blight side, where neighbors have been fined for not cutting their lawn. They might have been out sick, nobody realized it, but their lawn is overgrown, and they've gotten a letter from town
Right,
management, and that happened just a couple years ago to neighbors of mine, so.
Yeah, I think we have to be cautious of competing rules.
Yep.
All right, I like that, whatever that was.
I need a friendly amendment, somebody to reiterate what Ray said.
Would you like me to reread it, that paragraph? That
The
sentence?
Mona paragraph?
Reread the Mona
The
paragraph.
Mona clause.
Whereas, with the exception of farms, the town will use the addition of clover to grass lawns and/or the reduction of mowing to once every 2 or 3 weeks in certain areas on town property.
The town will strive to.
The town will strive to use.
Yeah.
Do you need that clause about the exception of farms? We don't have any.
Yes.
Yes.
We do?
Mhm.
Is that the town owns farmland?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we own that.
But we
Oh,
have-
well, that's true. That's of course, right.
Yeah.
And the, right, yep.
So, Billy, you have to
Yeah.
restate that.
Yeah.
The Mona clause.
Mona can do it again.
All right.
I do accept the friendly amendment, but is it okay to accept it from?
No.
No,
So-
it has to come from.
So.
Let's write it down.
So,
Go ahead. Go.
I believe it was, so whereas with the exception of farms, the town will strive to add clover to grass lawns
Yeah.
and/or reduce mowing to once every 2 to 3 weeks in certain areas?
Yeah.
Town property.
On town property.
All right. That's your friendly amendment.
That was my motion to make a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Accept your friendly amendment.
All right. Is there any discussion? Shall we vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you, Mona.
That was pretty.
All right. Let's move on to the mayor's report. So. So I think we've kind of reached a pivotal moment, I'm going to just say, like, as a community in terms of formally embracing sustainable efforts. And so one of our main goals since 2019 was to address sustainability. And at that time, we had just learned that Mira's plant was shutting down. It was leaving us and I think 54 or how many are we? 55 municipalities, perhaps? 51 to 55, abandoned and moving backwards with our MSW. And so we were among the very first municipalities to begin the conversations regarding alternatives to trash to energy incinerators. And in fact, the town manager and I were invited to the commissioner's office back in 2019, or early, actually it was very early 2020, because it was the same day that the governor shut down the state because COVID had reached us. My concern at that time was that with Mira closing in the future, DEEP was going to mandate unit-based pricing. And I didn't want that to be a mandate and a burden on our town. So we started these conversations. And from that, CCSMM was created a couple of months later. And the commissioner created all of these really cool committees. And Councilor Thoreau was on one of those committees. And we at that time began to really take a look at this. We began discussing with other municipalities. We hired our own coordinator and consultant to help with energy and trash. And fast forward, we started to navigate this incredibly complex world of trash and recycling, and have now been awarded $750,000 to start a pilot program here in Rocky Hill. And so I couldn't be more grateful and more excited to be recognized as a town by DEEP. And I just want to take a moment to thank town staff, the entire town council, and all the folks in the community, the volunteers who have been a part of this process. And I appreciate we're not taking any action tonight. We are going to continue to do our due diligence, but we've certainly come a long way since 2019. And we're moving on a better path in a variety of directions, including the formation of the Sustainable Rocky Hill Task Force, the new policy on pollinator pathways, which is enabling us to connect one day literally to other municipalities, the development and expansion of bikeability and sidewalks, and now with the legislative session having ended, CCSMM has formed 3 new committees, which I mentioned briefly before, and I have joined the Reduce and Reuse Committee, and I am assuming that Councilor O'Sullivan, who has taken Councilor Thoreau's place in trash talking, will be joining me on some of those meetings. And we're going to start moving some recycling initiatives, hopefully, forward in Rocky Hill to reacquaint ourselves with what goes in and what does not go in the big blue bin. So really tremendous efforts and a lot to be excited about. I want to recognize a few folks in the community first. Firefighter Lieutenant Bill Kelly, who I want to thank again for his outstanding service. I did receive an email from Sergeant Foss Rugen with respect to an incident that had occurred on Friday, July 29th, when Lieutenant Bill Kelly was clearing a fire call and happened to be down by the ferry and noticed a woman in need who was in her vehicle. And, you know, he went up. He was obviously concerned for this person and approached them and realized that, in fact, this woman was in need. Based on conversations and based on what was happening at that moment in her vehicle, he ended up calling the police, and eventually this woman was cited for DUI. But the importance of the story was that the park was full of families and children at that time. And really, if Lieutenant Kelly had not been paying attention, even though that was not necessarily his job, at that moment, had he not been paying attention, there really could have been some serious issues to this woman who was approaching the water. The ferry was closed, but apparently she was looking to get onto the ferry with her vehicle, and there could have been some problems, with the families there. So I want to thank him for seeing something and doing something about it. I also want to recognize the actions of some folks whose conduct saved a life of a resident recently. There was a resident who noticed a neighbor's newspaper had not been picked up for a couple of days, which was an unusual occurrence, and had reported this incident to a second neighbor. And that second neighbor did a walk around the property, got a sense that there was something wrong, and ended up calling the police. And come to find out, the person inside the home had been on the floor for a couple of days, and what thankfully was still alive. But it was because of these neighbors who were involved and paying attention to their neighborhood that this resident survived. And so I want to thank Mr. Ron Catania for bringing the story to my attention, and also for his swift response upon being alerted of this suspicious condition of a neighbor's front porch. So really great community work there. And of course, we had heard in public comment, and I just want to give another shout out to the folks who did clean up our park. There was tons of metal in there and debris, and especially a shout out to our Rocky Hill football team for helping the community, and to those folks who helped clean up those cemetery stones, because they're not only making the cemetery look good, but they are preserving our rich history in that historic cemetery. So just, I tell you these stories for I suppose another reason is if you see something, say something, right? If you feel that something doesn't seem right, don't ever be afraid to pick up the phone and call the police, and let an expert make the decision as to whether or not there needs to be some type of interaction. And just a couple more things at the state level. We're always looking to keep the local control, and so we have to have a seat at the table. CCM and COST have a variety of new committees now, and those are made up of mayors and first select people who meet to formulate legislative recommendations. And so the new committee that I will be sitting on is the new Policy Committee on Public Safety, Public Health, and Human Services, all of which are areas that need a lot of attention and better infrastructure for supporting municipalities. The past few days we have been celebrating Independence Day. 3 times we did, actually. So I had the honor and privilege of representing the town of Rocky Hill at these events, and you can see all of the beautiful photos on my Facebook page. There were flag raisings, and I want to just wish a very happy 75th India Independence Day to our many Indian and Indian American families. I also want to wish a very happy Pakistan Independence Day to our numerous Pakistani and Pakistani American families. And finally, a very happy West Indian Independence Day to all those families celebrating the rich traditions and cultures from that area. And that concludes my report. And so we will move on to the town manager report. And I think we actually have a typed one.
Yeah, in your package, you have a written town manager's report. Let me know if you like that process. Otherwise, I will not provide a written town manager's report in the future.
Very good. I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's good.
It's what I've done to my commissions that I work on. So I'm just going to go through my memo, and if you have any questions, just let me know. You can stop me at any time. Upcoming Eversource activity. Eversource will be doing quite a bit of upgrading along their transmission lines this year, beginning in September and ending through the end of this year to 2022 and possibly into the spring. They'll be working in the following areas: Beckley Road, Cromwell Avenue, France Street, Spino Ridge, Winding Brook Drive, Sunset Ridge. I will post an announcement on our website and also have John Murphy post an announcement on all of the social media accounts. Just a little shout out to our emergency response personnel. I'd like to note for the record the exemplary jobs our police, fire, and highway emergency responders are doing and have been doing for a very long time, responding to the many and various situations they've dealt with over the past few weeks and daily, and also over the course of the years. Top-notch professionals, as the mayor had mentioned earlier. Just a quick update on some of the grants. STEEP was submitted today. The deadline was today. Sonia from Sonic Group, our grant consultant, worked with Steve Sopelak to get this grant submitted. Just as a refresher, this is for sidewalks up at Century Hills. We may have to do that in phases because of the cost, but we're going to continue on, and hopefully we get some grant money. Just a quick update on the Glastonbury Avenue sidewalk project. BL Companies is still in the process of surveying the corridor to make sure of the proper widths and whether or not we will actually be able to fit sidewalks within the corridor. BL Companies is also working on the Center Green expansion project, analyzing some data that Steve Sopelak and the engineering department has provided to them. So those two projects are still in the preliminary design and planning phase. The Sonic Group is working with a number of grant funding sources for locating EV charging stations in town. You may have noticed that we have a couple of EV charging stations in town. One at the Arch Plaza location, and one going in at the Kohl's Shopping Plaza area. These are independent of what the Sonic Group is looking at. The Sonic Group is looking at a larger process, a larger grouping of EV stations for town, free town-sponsored EV charging stations, where we would have to provide a certain year, probably 2 or 3 years worth of free charging for public, and at that point we can start charging a fee for that.
Ray, the ones at Kohl's you were talking about, did those start? Because I was over there and I didn't see anything. Did those start, or that's still this planning stage? Or
Well,
Or
I
did
do
just not see
believe
it?
they're being reviewed by the planning department.
Okay, so I didn't miss it. Okay, so they're still in the early
Yeah,
stages.
yeah.
Gotcha.
They may require planning and zoning commission approval.
Okay.
We have the Sonic Group looking at helping the Town Housing Authority this year for their small cities grant proposal to continue upgrades at their housing facilities on Willow Street in the Murphy Housing Complex. They're looking to, I believe, apply for $2 million of small cities money and also maybe another $2 million for CHFA funding. These upgrades are similar to what they have done in the past, utility upgrades, electrical, kitchen, bathroom, roofing.
So Ray, this was the grant that council approved to go forward back some months ago, I guess.
No.
No, because we had the Housing Authority come before us asking for us to approve the town to invest in writing a grant. Where are we with that one, if that's not this
Okay,
one?
that's this one, but we haven't applied. This is a very arduous application process. We have to advertise for a consultant first. Housing Authority has to develop their plans fully at their cost. And then there's a process we must go through to evaluate our community facilities and make sure they're updated to current ADA standards and fair housing requirements and a whole host of other federal regulations in order to be
So it's in
acceptable in the
process.
process. Yes, it's in the process.
But it's not this one that you're noting here.
It is this one.
It's part of it.
Oh,
It is this one, but it's not, the commission, the town council hasn't really officially approved it. We'll have to come back and do a couple of public hearings. The record of the public hearing has to be part of the application,
okay.
and that would be the approval at that point, the official approval.
Can you just talk about the charging stations just for a second? Like, like, what is that process? What do you mean? So we would own them after a couple of years?
We would not own.
No.
Well, yeah, well, if they're on town property.
Okay.
There are programs where the town the town can get funding if these EV charging stations are on town property.
Okay.
So they're looking at areas where they could be on town property. They're also looking at private facilities that could get funding also, maybe down by like exit 23. But if they're on town property, there is a requirement in many of these funding programs where we would have to provide or allow free charging of these vehicles for a certain number of years, maybe 2 or 3. I don't recall.
Okay. Thank you.
So would the town be paying the electricity bills for those, or is that part of the grant, or?
The town would be paying. And the grant would provide most of the funding, for the hardware. And the town would have to kick in some of the funding beyond that.
Does that fall into the sustainable CT?
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's what the sustainable
That would
CT
be
action.
actually a more substantial
Solar money.
capital improvement project like a seawall retaining wall.
Yeah.
Unlike a seawall retaining wall, but with real substance.
Well, could the money from the NIPS revenue be used toward that? Is that sustainable, or that's different?
Yes.
That's gonna be trash related. Okay, not just sustainable. Okay, I'm trying.
What if you put a little recycling bucket for the nips on the charger?
I don't think they should be just using their NIPS while they're driving.
Yeah, right. Might want to discourage
Passengers
that.
only. Yeah.
Just saying.
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on. The library. Library will be closing on September 1st for some reorganizational purposes and some deep cleaning. I should have put that in quotes from the library director, from deep cleaning. Going electronic. I'd like to try to save some paper.
Functions against us.
Maybe save some energy and possibly improve efficiency by proposing that we convert our town council agenda packets from hard copies to electronic distribution. Save on delivery, gasoline, the time that an employee has to drive, and also on the copying and the time at the copy machine, and et cetera. So if I have your blessing, we'd like to try that and see how that works for the next town council meeting.
And what about like the other commissions? And
No, I'd like to
committee.
try, see how this
Okay.
works first. And then we can do it for the committees, all the town council committees, and possibly the rest of the
I guess, yeah.
commissions in town.
I assume we can bring our laptops so we can have our agenda. in front
You
of us?
you can print them out at home too and bring them, but
Oh,
the idea is that
that's not saving paper.
it's saving paper for the town though.
Not environmentally saving paper.
But Ray, just along those lines, and Councilor Thoreau's point, if we bring laptops, there's no electrical plugs on the.
under
on the-
here, there's
Is
some.
is there some where we could actually plug in so they don't turn off? If we don't have, or could we run an extension or power, something simple?
That's a very good point. We'll have to,
Oh, that'd be dangerous.
extension cords would not work, but
Fighting for the outlet.
we'll have to look into that then. Let me,
Chromebooks.
And they may be here for the monitors, and I just don't see them.
Yeah, it may be.
I'll talk to IT
Okay.
to see how that could work.
And then, Ray, just for executive session, I guess we would just get a different PDF, or would those be printed out? 'Cause sometimes we do get sensitive contracts. I mean, or
Yeah, those
all
probably
sorts
get
of
printed
things.
out, and if, you know, and if they're not, you know, yeah, they'll be printed out.
Although, well, I was going to suggest, but maybe we don't want to do this, depending on how big it is. If they were here, someone wouldn't have to drive to our house to drop them off. But if we need to review it ahead of time, that probably wouldn't work.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
cut down on the amount of paper
Right.
that the town uses for all these, for all the packages, and the time consumed at the copy machine and collating and putting all these packages together.
Yes, but just executive session, it would say that we think that would say the same. Everything else, we'll just try it out.
Yeah, I mean, usually you don't have a lot of correspondence to hand out at an executive session.
So I just want to congratulate you because of all the things we had on the agenda, sustainable related. You're the only one who got something accomplished. Just like that.
Take the count. So let's see how it works. Obviously, we have to work on the logistics, but hopefully we can work that through. Well, I have the equity distribution that was already, Alan already mentioned during his Finance Committee report. I won't go into that. Stand Down this year, 2022, will be held at the Veterans Home and Hospital, Friday, September 23rd, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. There is a FEMA program that is called the COVID-19 Funeral Expenses Program. And it's intended to help ease the financial stress caused by COVID-19. And FEMA may provide up to $9,000 in assistance per deceased individual for COVID-19 related funeral expenses to family members or relatives of deceased individuals. We did put a link on our website, and you can visit the website under current events, under current news, and that'll take you right to the FEMA website. Very, very easy to read through that particular information. I also had IT provide a link to our public schools on our website. And last month, up to last month, there was no link. You couldn't find a link to the public schools. So if you click on departments, you'll see Board of Education, and that will take you right to their website. Just a simple thing to do. And our Community Senior Center, as you all know, our Senior Center staff, Community Center, Senior Center staff is doing a fantastic job. Gina has, I don't know where she gets the energy or the ideas to do all of these events, but it's fantastic. As she had mentioned, they now have 1,400 members, 85% of them being Rocky Hill residents. There is a need, however, for volunteers for the fitness center. And as a note, the center will be closed from August 29th through September 2nd, again, for deep cleaning in Alice training. And that's that. If you have any questions?
Did you do the farmers market and concerts?
Pardon me?
Did you skip over farmers markets and concerts?
I'm just trying to get out of here.
I know.
It was an exemplary comment.
Oh, I did. And again, I'd like to have a shout out to our Parks and Rec crew. They did a fantastic job, as always, with the Farmers Market and the Summer Concert Series. And hopefully, we look forward to the next season. Possibly farmers markets every other week, perhaps, every week. Who knows what we'll be doing. But again, just a fantastic job. Fantastic crew.
Awesome. All right, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Madam Mayor, motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone.